Welcome to Six in the Six. Tonight's guest, the fabulous Melissa Ames. Mel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you on. It's I've known you for quite a long time and you've had quite the journey, so I'm looking forward to finding out more.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've known you since 4 years old. It's been a while.
Oh wow. Yeah, I won't get into some of those stories from back in those days.
Yeah.
Um that could be interesting though. Um so Mel, you are currently the assistant coach for the 16U at the Bishop Kearney Selects hockey team.
Yep.
Um, so let's go back, maybe back in those early days. Um, what initially what initially fueled your love for the game and kind of a brief, quick journey of how you got here?
Okay. So I'd say my love for the game kind of just, I don't know, I think it was like naturally with it. My dad is the one who kind of got me into it when I was growing up. I remember I was like very young, asking them to play, and my mom's like, "Oh, you're not playing. There's no way." But anyways, I started playing at a young age. I think it was 5. Played boys growing up for a while, went to girls. I ended up playing locally in Rochester, and then obviously down to Pittsburgh Elite for a year before I went to college. And then kind of I would say probably around like when I got to like playing tier 1 at like 14U was kind of when I really was like really in love with the game. I'm extremely competitive, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm in love with the game. It's because I love to be challenged. I like to kind of break barriers and figure out how to do things differently. So then I guess after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I obviously had a degree, didn't know what I was going to do with my business degree. So I had an opportunity to go overseas and play in Germany, so I played there for 2 years, and it was awesome. I learned so much about the game, learned so much about myself. I learned kind of about how to help others within the game while still playing the game. And then when I came home, that's when I really got into coaching. Coached just the youth teams here locally, from all skill levels, all age levels. Really fell in love with it. And then 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to go to BK, and I've been there for 2 years now, and I love it there. It's a grind, but it's competitive. My team this year is really good. Last year, we were really strong as well. We're national contenders. So that's pretty cool. But every day it's different. Um, it's being able to help kids grow, not only on the ice but off the ice. Especially the group that I coach with. We have 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. So the age gap's there. But it's been pretty neat to kind of grow and also just coach at the different levels and tiers throughout, I guess, the last 6 years now that I've been coaching.
Yeah, I think it's cool that your journey took you full circle back to Rochester where you started it all. Um, how do you feel the landscape for girls hockey is different today than it was back when you were just first coming up?
Yeah, for sure. When I was first growing up, there wasn't even a girls program here locally that was strong enough to really play. Then that's when I was like really young. So that's why kind of why I was playing boys. When I turned like kind of 13 years old is kind of when the girls program really took off. Here it was pretty competitive at tier 1 in Rochester for a while. It's kind of went back and forth. Part of the reason why like I had to go to Pittsburgh was because of that, just not having the strong enough levels here. But I'd say now, BK is a good example. Granted, our kids aren't all from here from Rochester, but it just shows the growth of the game. There's girls coming from all over to Rochester. We have girls from Slovakia, Denmark coming here to Rochester to play hockey. It's growing the game here. I know we have a lot of younger girls that look up to a lot of our girls at BK. I think that's helped growing it, but I would still say the scheme within kind of where we are right now and living in Rochester, girls hockey isn't that huge, and that's kind of something that I have been really kind of working on to try to how to develop the game and making teams that are here locally more competitive too.
You mentioned like the younger girls looking up to the girls that are in your program now. Do you guys get the opportunity to go out to some of the local events and kind of mentor or at least showcase yourselves?
Yeah, so actually this weekend is a good example. There's a local tournament here for the youth teams. And I know on Saturday our U16 team is going to have a game at our little rink that's here where all the youth teams are playing. A lot of those girls are going to come to those games. We also have a couple younger ones that come to our games and make signs for our girls. It's kind of cool, unique. And we are just going to start soon getting into where we go to like the learn to play and the hockey 101s. And we'll do a little through that, kind of grow the game as well through there.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I've always been a strong advocate and believer in kind of if you can see it, you can be it. So just being able to look up to, it can be like 2, 3, even 4 years older, but they can see a natural progression instead of like looking up to a professional, let's say when they're little.
Yep. Yeah, I always use that too, especially with girls hockey, because I mean now we're the girls women's professional league, which is great. But before it's like, we can look up the NHL players, but that's not really, we can't quite get there. So it's how do you relate? And it is, it is getting females involved with the younger kids and showing them, hey, I was once your age here at Hockey 101. This is my path, this is kind of how I got there, and kind of showing them through that as well.
Yeah, so the girls from the different countries coming over and just making a well-diverse team, if you will, of perspective, maybe just skill levels for growing up. How do you think having that international flavor has kind of helped strengthen the program?
I'd say I guess through culture. And I can kind of adhere to this because I was the one who was the international player when I was overseas. So I kind of like relate to those kids a lot. But hockey is hockey, but there's so many different ways that hockey is played in different areas. So I find like, a lot of our international kids, maybe they're stronger or more physical because overseas in Europe, the game is a little bit more in terms of, I don't want to say we're checking for girls hockey. It's not that, but it is tends to be a little bit more physical. I think that helps a lot. I also think it helps our girls kind of just be open-minded. And, whether it's you're from a different country or whether it's from your California, we have so many girls that come from different backgrounds, and it helps our program be able to kind of grow and learn that at the end of the day, we're all here for hockey, and that's what they want to be here for is hockey. But everyone has a story behind them. And I think that kind of helps build our culture.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that. I think in the situations where I've worked with not necessarily hockey, but the other sports I coach, just seeing how it's kind of not necessarily the values, but just the way they think and approach the game. It's good to we're not making robots out there. Hopefully, we're
Yeah.
kind of creating a creative, free thinking people that can perform under different circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that too, it's like, it's kind of how you can relate to all the kids and all the players. So, like, for example, one of the girls we have right now, she's from Slovakia. Pretty really good player. When she first came over to her English wasn't that great. And it's been cool to kind of see like our players be patient with her and like help her through. And, like especially for me when I was playing overseas, kind of how I related to my teammates was through hockey. We'd relate through that way. So it's kind of how she built those connections was how do you like what is the forecheck? What do we do on the forecheck? And she can relate through it that way. Like now, like just watching her grow just in the past like 8 weeks and her English has grown and it's cool for our girls to be exposed to those kind of different situations too, because at such a young age, which is really neat.
Yeah. So going back, you made me think of all these questions and your things. Going back to when you needed to make the decision to play for the Pittsburgh select team. Um, I mean, what was your thought process in terms of where it would get you and if it was worth I don't want to say the effort, but worth the drive? Like was 2, 3 times a week? Maybe I should ask your dad the question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of goes back to how competitive I was. Um, I knew I wanted to play college hockey. I actually remember it's funny with my mom. I told her at a very young age, I was like, "Mom, I want to play college hockey." And I remember her looking up at me and saying, "Honey, keep dreaming. You're not playing college hockey." And I just was like, I was so competitive. And as obviously as I got better, that goal was much more achievable and I could see it. Um, and I guess it just came down to the talent level here in Rochester. Yeah, I'm never going to downplay that. There's kids here that are really good that stayed in Rochester, which is great. But I think I needed to be challenged by being on a team that was much more competitive and also a team that played teams from farther out. So when I played for Pittsburgh, a lot of the girls that were on my team kind of were doing the same thing that I was doing, and they weren't really from Pittsburgh. I think there was like maybe seven or eight kids that were actually from Pittsburgh, but the rest of us weren't. We were all from all over. I think it helped me kind of be able to kind of the same thing I was talking about with the international kids, but just connect with kids that maybe aren't from here, or maybe have a different background, or maybe have learned a different style of play. And then I kind of think it kind of helped me grow like that and be able to be prepared for college, especially with take away the time management, all that stuff. But that kind of helped me as well.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't even think of that piece. And I think you're right about the comparison to the international kind of opening your eyes to the different style
Yeah.
of plays and thing. Yeah, and the time management, I'm sure that was huge when you made that college decision. Did you have faith that all that time and effort was going to pay off for you? I mean, being told you couldn't get there, you kind of grabbed onto that goal. Was, how much of a bumpy ride was that?
Yeah, I mean, it was for sure bumpy. There were days, especially even before I went to Pittsburgh, the days here that I'd be training, and I would just be like, "Oh, this is miserable." My days, like especially when I was local here, I'd go to school, I'd go to the rink, I'd have a workout, then I'd do a lesson, homework, practice, and then go home. Looking back at it now, I'm like, I was crazy doing that, but I loved it because not only did it help me grow within hockey, like I use those same skills I learned then in terms of time management, in terms of how to, whatever it is, how to get through your day. I use those to this day. So it's pretty cool. I mean, I don't think I ever had doubt. Um, Maybe a little doubt, but I think a lot of it kind of when I was like 15 and I started really talking to college coaches and going to those kind of camps and kind of just especially like playing tier one, like I could see where I was amongst other players. Um, so I don't want to say if I had doubt, but I definitely knew I could do it. I just wasn't sure if it was gonna be D1 or D3 per se.
Right. And it gets hard and then you start to like, oh, I don't know, and is
Yeah.
it worth it? And so it's so you mentioned the D1, D3 thing. I actually use your example a lot when talking to people who are about to be recruited, that there's such a stigma on D1.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about as that player going through that process, what was in your head about looking D1 and D3 and why'd you ultimately choose what you did?
Yeah, so I had a few offers at D1s and then I had offers at D3, obviously. I guess my biggest thing was that going in to play in my freshman year, I knew that I wanted to play. So I knew that I've had friends that were older than me that went to play D1 and play dressed in like 3 games their freshman year, or they maybe dressed and didn't see the ice. So like I knew that I wanted to play, and I also knew that I wanted to be in a program that was successful. So kind of some of the schools that I was being recruited by at the time weren't really that successful. They kind of weren't winning as many games. It might sound bad for me to say that, but I was like, I like to win. I'm competitive when it comes to that aspect. Um, and so obviously when I chose Plattsburgh, I would say like our structure was very similar to a D1 structure in terms of how we ran it. Like we were there the first week of school doing preseason nonstop, right into our regular season. The only difference is we play a little less games than D1s. But I think, my perception was I knew I wanted to play right away, and I knew I wanted to be in a program that had success in the past, and I knew I wanted to be in a place that had a good chance of just making it to the final four of the playoffs.
Well, and in hindsight, you could ask, did you actually play one less game? Because as I recall, for 4 straight years, you played as many games as possible and took home the big trophy for 4 years in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. So our record was 111, 5-4, which is crazy every time I say that out loud because I'm like, how did we do that? But yeah, so in hindsight, I guess probably not because I did play all the games through.
Yeah, that's still. I don't think there's many NCAA athletes that can say they've won 4 national titles when they
Yeah.
were in school in a row. So that, I mean, one that has to be. I mean, every pitcher I like was looking for pitchers for this and pulling them
Yeah.
up. You've got this huge grin from ear to ear, holding up that, and God, who could blame you? A lot of hard work. It all paid
Yeah.
off, right?
I just remember my freshman year, I was talking to a bunch of other freshmen. I was like, man, it'd be cool to like win ECAC playoffs and like, maybe go to the NCAAs and then like we win it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool. And then like next year we're like, yeah, no, that's all we can do. We have to be there. There's no other option here.
Yeah, and I was it. Boy, I'm getting old. I can't remember. I think it might have been the fourth one. Was. It was looking dicey until the very end there.
Yeah, that was an Adrian and we won in overtime. We were losing with 20.7 seconds left in third period.
I remember sitting on the edge of my couch, like completely stressed out, and
Yeah.
then going absolutely bananas.
That game, like as a player too, like I went through every single emotion during that game. And like being able to manage that as a player, like now on this side of it, like as a coach, it's like so much relatable, which is kind of cool when you look at it now, especially being in those
How
situations.
satisfying was it in that hostile away environment to hear the energy deflate out of the home crowd?
Yeah, very satisfying. I think that one of the most satisfying things is I remember it was like 3 minutes left in the third period, I think, and I had watched the NCAA reps walk behind our bench and put the table with the hats and shirts like behind Adrian's bench. And I just remember looking over and being like, oh, no way. This is not happening. And like our whole bench saw it and we were like, nope, this is not happening. And then when we scored to tie it, we watched them bring the whole table right back to the middle in between both benches. I think that part was kind of still to this day, I'm like, that's funny.
Yeah, that's great. Um, what how has that experience of the four titles and just the grind of getting there and kind of that whole team what it takes to do that. How did that experience help you as a coach where you're at now and kind of relaying those messages to the team?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I would say, and I use this kind of same saying with my team now, is that we say the hardest thing about this place is it's every day, but the best thing about this place is it's every day. And that's one thing that like I definitely learned as a player. There's days where you're in the middle of January and it's so gray and you're miserable and it's like I don't want to get up this morning and go to morning skills. I don't want to get up and go do extra workouts, but you just do it because it's for the team and it's for the best for the team. And it's how we're gonna get better. It's how yourself like how I'm gonna get better as a person, how I'm gonna help my team get to the next step. I think a lot of those things, like the mental part of it that I learned throughout college about how to push past, the so-called being tired or you think you can't do it, how to push past that mental block is kind of like how I'm hoping now that I'm in working with my kids. I've even seen it this year too. Our like the growth in our team. We always say like you got to grow a week, you got to grow a month and a week with our team because we're so young and stuff like that. And there's days where we come off of a 6-game road trip, we get back Sunday night at 11:30, and we're skating on Tuesday morning. And it's just like they show up and they're like, "Oh, I'm tired. I'm tired." I'm like, "You got to find a way to get through it because everyone else right now is not doing what you're doing." So just be the hardest working players. And I think that's something that like I give credit to my college coach. He was a really good coach when it came to those kind of aspects. And I'm hoping that, some of those things that he's taught me, I'm helping to kind of teach my kids as well.
I think that's huge. The two things you said, the one about knowing what you need to do and get done and doing it whether you feel like it or not. That's a sign of a champion.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you said was, let your actions dictate your feelings, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Because if it's easy to go, I'm tired, I don't want to do it, and you have a
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah. That's one thing too, like, especially in college, like I lived with hockey players, and back to kind of how I'm so competitive, but like everybody on my team was so competitive. So like if I realized, hey, my roommate was going to do stairs, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to come do stairs with you now because you're going to do stairs. Or you're going to do an extra work. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to come now too because I can't let you get one up. I think that's kind of like something very similar. The program that I'm at right now, all of our kids are just like that. And they all live together as well because it's dormitories there. So I can relate to that. Like where I'm at now is much more structured to kind of how a college program is. I think that's how I can relate a lot with them because I kind of just did it. So it's interesting. Been interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. So for those 4 years, like, how did you as a player feel that were there changes in the pressure having won one national title? Was there more in their sophomore year? And then did it build into your junior year? And how did you and the rest of the team kind of deal with that, having a larger target on your back every year?
Yeah, I mean, I remember our coach always saying, no matter what team we play, all they want to do is beat us. Their goal for their season is to beat us. Whereas like for us, it's like, oh, we're playing a weaker team. Like in our head, we're like, oh, this will be a cakewalk. But no, because every team we played, you're gonna get their best because all they want to do is beat Plattsburgh. So I think for us, like managing pressure, I would say like, I give credit to my coach, but he did a very good job at kind of like keeping us neutral and keeping us level. Obviously the bigger games, pressure was there, against Elmira and maybe our rivals and Norwich and stuff like that. But I think in those moments is kind of when we all like those are the ones you get excited for. Like pressure is a privilege, I kind of always say. And it's like if you aren't embracing pressure, then maybe this like at this kind of level and top tier, it's not for you. Especially kind of like what I learned in college too is like like pressure made me just want to be better and be like with that with all aspects, mentally, physically, emotionally. And I relied heavily on teammates in those situations, whether it's going my way or it wasn't going my way. I think that's kind of where like team culture really came into aspect, especially in college for me. Like our culture was phenomenal with every aspect, whether you're a fourth line player or first line player, everyone knew their role and everyone was embracing their role. So I think in terms of pressure, like it builds off of the team culture and kind of like stuff like that. And I think, for me as a coach now, it's kind of what I'm kind of helping and kind of building too.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, especially the pressure piece of it. I think the hard part sometimes is the flip side of that, how do you motivate and kind of have your team play your game on the ice when you've scouted the opposition and it looks like it's going to be in maybe an easier
Yeah.
competition than usual? How do you how what kind of messages and what do you tell your team to not play down to the competition, so to speak?
Yeah, we always say it's more about us than it is about the other team. So like when we say with those, like for example, with us as the coaches, we know we're playing a team that maybe is weaker. We always kind of rely back on our greatest part of our team is our team. So I always say it's more about us in this room than it is about anybody else. And when we say that, it's going back to, we are still going to run our systems as if we were playing the number one team in the nation right now. We are still going to play it. We're going to coach it the same way. You're going to get coached hard. You're going to get called out if you're kind of doing things that maybe you wouldn't do in a higher end game. In this past weekend, I guess kind of a good example that we just went to Minnesota and we played Shattuck St. Mary's, who's the number one team, and we played Minnesota Magazine, who's number two team, and we played a couple other teams that were maybe a little bit lower. But the message from the beginning was you can't look forward to those games that are on Saturday night and Sunday because we're not there. You got to get through here. You got to be where your feet are. If the game's at 12, we're here at 12. We're not worried about Saturday night at 7 p.m. So again, the biggest thing we always say is kind of like being in the moment, embracing the moment. How do you get through that moment? And it's always, we just have a standard and you got to reach it. And I think that's something that as a player that I learned too in college, it's a standard, and me taking a day off isn't good enough. It's not going to help me. It's not going to help my team. It's just, you got to reach that standard.
Yeah, 100%. You're either above that line or below that line. It doesn't really matter. I agree. I think it's tough these days in some regard though, because everyone has access to everything. So even if you
Yeah.
try to, you can't really hide them
Oh yeah.
watching film on somewhere. So it's
Yeah. We have the film system we use, and it's our kids are on it all day. We're on it all day. So
yeah, it's a little different probably than when you were growing up too.
yeah, for sure.
Kind of back to that D1, D3 decision point. Some of the things I hear sometimes is, if you're going to play beyond college, you won't get discovered if you're not playing D1. And I mean, obviously, in your case, you went over to Germany and played pro. I know at least one of your Plattsburgh teammates, if not more than one, um, played professionally, one with the Buttes for a season.
Yep.
Um, what's your message to your team as they're looking to move on and you talk to them about that decision and what's beyond?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I think everyone has their own path that they want to go on. For the ones that are obviously are, like my team now is pretty strong ended. Like we have a bunch of kids that we're just playing on the U18 national team. Then we have kids that are maybe in the middle of the pack, and then we have kids that maybe will play D3. But I think the message is find the place that's best for them, and that there's opportunity out there for everyone. And a good example of that is right now, like with a professional league. Like I have players that I played with at Plattsburgh that were drafted in that league. I have players that have gone overseas and played at the higher professional leagues there. So I think the I guess the message is that there's always an opportunity for as long as you're willing to put the work in. It kind of sounds a little cliche saying this, there's always opportunity, but if you're willing to go past what's hard, and what they want is on the other side of hard, and continuing to build, like you can do it. You just have to be able to kind of put your mind to it and to be able to achieve those goals.
Right. I'm a strong believer that talent will get found, as like you said, as long as you're putting in the work and the effort, that word gets out through the
Yep.
coaching networks and whatever. So definitely love that message. Um, Talk briefly about your time in Germany. That had to be pretty cool. You find out you're playing pro over there. You get
Yeah.
over to that environment. And how was that from like a culture shock standpoint, both on and off the ice?
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate that my roommate was another import as well. So she was Canadian. Her and I are still best friends this day. So that really helped. But I guess, I'll kind of use a funny saying is one of the first games I played, and this is more of just like the culture part of it. I got a penalty and I didn't know what my number was in German. And I just remember like the ref like skating behind me, yelling at me, screaming at me. And I just like sat down on the bench, and the ref was like in my face, and he's like in German. I just looked at him. I was like, I don't know what you're saying. And he's like, oh, you speak English. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, you have a penalty. And his English was great, but I was like, so like, yeah, that was like the first hurdle for me, was like figuring out the language and being able to actually understand what's going on. I was also fortunate that my coach also spoke English, so that kind of helped me. But again, I guess the toughest part for me was that not all my teammates really spoke English very well. So like when it came to like practices and in games, I kind of felt that barrier was there quite a bit when in terms of like just being like hey, like, where am I supposed to be on this play? Or like even talking to them, like, hey, what are you doing? They're just looking at me and I'm looking at them and we're both like, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you're doing. So I guess a lot of ways that we kind of learned was by drawing plays on the boards. Like my coach would always have a whiteboard and we would like draw things out. And we're like, okay, good. Yep, good. Um, but obviously as I played later longer, within like 6 months, the hockey lingo you would say kind of came through, and like my German now is really good with that. Um, but I guess the other thing I wouldn't say struggled with, but had to adapt with was the physicality of the game. It was much more physical there than it was here when I was playing. So that took a little bit of adjustment too. But I would say the game itself was very comparable to kind of like what I was playing here.
So was the first German you had to learn with sin bin?
It should have been, but I should have learned my number first because I didn't know what that was in German. That was for sure.
You mentioned the physicality of the game, and we kind of talked about it earlier when we were talking about internationals. What's your what's your feeling on like the physicality here in the North American game as opposed to international? Do you think that should be a little more physical here? Personally, I believe women should be able to check each other.
Yeah.
What are your
Yeah.
take?
Yeah. I would say since I stopped playing, the game has gotten much more physical. I would say that. I do think like, I mean, we need open ice checking hits? No, I don't think we need that. I don't think the men even need that because I think it takes away from the game. But I do think that if there's contact along the boards, if there's contact and you're angling and we're playing the puck and we're playing with the body, like we should be allowed to do that. Um, I do find like sometimes in especially boys hockey, maybe even like at the like I gotta say like U18, I think sometimes I don't want to say that the physicality takes away from the game, but I think it's too much. So I think there needs to be a barrier. And I'm all for physical. I want to be much more physical. I want to be able to play physical. But I do think that, and I don't know if it's like maybe at the like the tier two levels or low levels, is sometimes I see it's like some guys are just out to hit people. And that's the part I don't like. But I do like when it's a controlled game and it's playing physical and like if you're along the board, you're making contact, that's fine. And the refs kind of letting it go. But like the one thing that we've struggled with, especially this year, is some refs will let it go and some refs won't let it go. So it's like you're playing Saturday night and the refs are like, here, you're gonna go play a physical game, you're gonna have fun, you're gonna whatever. And the next morning it's like, oh, I skated past her and touched her shoulder, and that's a penalty. So I guess, now, especially like coaching in and then for our players, it is kind of hard to like teach it per se, because you never know what you're gonna get. And if you're playing in Canada, it's one thing. If you're playing here, it's another thing. If you're playing in Minnesota, it's another thing. So I guess that part's hard. So I wish it was kind of like a neutral and they would allow more contact for say.
Yeah, that's kind of tough. I feel it's hard enough sometimes to get in and kind of get a taste of how the game is going to be called just from a, what are they letting you get away with?
Yeah.
But then you throw in that, like you said, can I even touch somebody?
Yep.
Yeah, that's got to make it a little tough to get a read on what's going on.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you on the physicality comment. You know me, I like a pretty
Yeah.
physical game. Um, but there's definitely a line where you can have the strong physicality within the kind of how you play it based on just running people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. Exactly. And that's what I
How
think.
would you on the physicality side, what would you think about the women dropping the gloves on occasion? I kind of like a good hockey fight.
I mean, hey, I'd be all for that.
Hold on, what was sin bin in German again?
And I don't even remember what it is nowadays, but I'd be in there.
Um, that's good stuff. So you came back to the States after Germany, after playing there. Um, how did how did the I know Bishop Kearney hadn't been too long into their program here before you
Yeah.
jumped on board, a couple years maybe. How did
Here,
that come about?
yeah, our girls program this is our 8th year. The boys program, this is their 4th year. To be honest, I don't quite know how it originally started, which is gonna be bad for me to say, but I know the people that were involved in it. It happened like right before COVID hit, and then with the COVID years, it kind of got a little crazy with that part. But after the COVID years, it's taken off like amazingly. Um, for example, kind of I mentioned it earlier too, but last year we had 7 kids that were on the U18 women's national team. They were on our 19U team, which just goes to show the strength of the program. This year, our girl that's from Slovakia, she's on the U18 national team there. We have a goalie that's from the Czech Republic who's on the U18 national team. So the brand has just skyrocketed. We have a number of kids that go to D1. We have a number of kids that go to Ivy League. We have kids that go to D3, NESCAC schools as well. Um, so I think like especially here in Rochester, it's been a good opportunity kind of for I would say New York State kids. We have a lot of New York State kids, maybe not just from Rochester, but New York State in general, to have an opportunity to play at a place that's competitive, kind of still close to home, but not too far from home. And it's a place that's where hockey is just every day.
Yeah, I think it's great. I've got to get to more games, honestly. I'm too busy on the green stuff.
Yeah, I get to the ice.
Right, exactly. So it's talking about national teams and things. You had the opportunity this past summer to be involved in the USA Hockey Girls National. Was it the 15, I
Yep.
think,
Yep.
camp? Um, how did that come up? That's really cool, by the way, and congrats on that.
Thank you.
How did that come about, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so the way they pick them is through application process. So it's all everyone applies. It can be youth coaches, it can be college coaches, it can be Joe Smo. You just apply. Yeah, I was fortunate enough that I got picked. I was in an intern program when I was there, which is really cool. Because I got to connect with a lot of college coaches. And I also got to connect with they had intern coaches that were there that had been involved within USA Hockey. Got to connect with them. I learned a lot, kind of about coaching techniques and coaching styles, different ways to coach with kids and connect with kids. I learned different drills from people. We kind of shared drills, talking about angling, different terminology. I would say a word, and they would say the same concept, a different word. I'm like, oh, I never thought about saying it that way. Learned a lot about that. Though camp was a week-long camp, so it was all 15-year-old girls. They got selected to go to the camp, to national camp. So that was pretty cool. So I was involved with the team. We would have practice and games on the bench for all that. So working with closely with the girls. But for me personally, especially as a coach, I definitely, learned a lot in terms of being able to grow myself and kind of in terms of like how do you say certain words and practices that connect with a 15-year-old? Because a 15-year-old's mind is a lot different than a 28-year-old mind. If I say one thing and in my mind, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. They're probably like, I don't know what she's talking about. That makes no sense. So like, and being able to kind of read them and like connect with them that way is kind of like the one takeaways that I've learned. And just also the networking, just being able to talk with college coaches, USA people that have been in the USA development program forever, just picking their brains and asking them tons of questions. I think that was kind of cool for me too.
Yeah, totally. I like as you were talking about that, you made me think about how the different perspectives you were getting from those coaches and those girls that were there, and adding that onto your perspectives from a player and dealing with those different people, and now the coaching at the BK, just that well-roundedness that, I mean, it's got to be extremely helpful for you dealing with anyone.
Yeah, I always say, especially like even as a player, there's always opportunities for growth. But even now as a coach, I think there's even tons of more opportunity for growth. Every day, I'm learning something from the other coaches that I coach with now at BK, whether I'm learning it from the kids or I'm watching video, whatever it is. I'm constantly learning, and I think that's kind of like the biggest thing that I've had to continue to take away from college. Because like when I graduated college, I was that stubborn person. I was like, oh, I know it all. I'm a 4-time national champion. I'm just I'm cool, but really I'm not. Like there's tons of opportunity for growth.
Yeah, man, that's a great point. And you see it in, it doesn't matter what sport, but there's the attitude that I played and therefore I'll be an awesome coach. And maybe through that filter, you're saying, well, if you didn't, maybe you wouldn't be. And then there's kind of the flip side of that, of people who hadn't played that turn out to be good coaches.
Yep.
Yeah, it just depends on the person.
Yeah, it's also just learning the game. The game has evolved since I was playing it, however long ago when I was in Germany. It's changed since then too. So it's constantly learning the game, learning new ways to adjust the game when you're in the game. That's something that I've learned as a coach too. Like what do I like when I'm watching my team play, like mid game, if we're getting beat up the wall in breakouts, how do we change it? What do we need to do? So those are kind of things that I, especially even like at USA Hockey Camp, learned a lot through that too as well.
Yeah, how much that's another great point, because I'm a big believer in continuously educating and staying on top and looking for new things. How much how much of your day, your week, whatever it is, do you spend kind of bettering yourself, and what do you ask your team to do in terms of bettering their IQ when it's not on ice?
Yeah, I would say so. Besides like the coaching development stuff that I kind of do, some of it's with USA Hockey, some of it I listen to podcasts or read books. I learn through that as well. Um, I guess there's two answers to that. One of the big ones is collaborating with the other three coaches I coach with. So I have a coach I coach with at 16U, and then there's two that are at 19U. And all the three of them have had crazy backgrounds that are really cool, and they've coached at various levels. So learning from them. But I think, one of the biggest ways that, especially me as a coach in the past year and a half, 2 years, is just by, and it's gonna sound lame to say it, but watching hockey. We use Instat for our program. And like, for example, right now we just had 4 games of the weekend. They're all on Instat. And I spent Monday, Tuesday, and I just, whether there's 2 times, 3 times, but I'll rewatch the games. I'll write stuff down, I'll clip things. Like we made a change to our PK for this year, and I've been watching NHL clips, I've been watching college clips of the PK. And I think our players do a really good job of that too, in terms of watching video. I do weekly video sessions with our team. And then I'll do individual sessions with our team. So for me, I think one of the best ways I've learned in terms of the game per se, I'd say is just watching it nonstop and just watching other teams play. How do their systems work? How does that match our systems? What are we doing? How can we change it? And just things like that.
And it can be humbling to watch yourself play,
Yeah.
because when you're out there, you're like, I'm so fast. And then you look at yourself, you're like, ooh, wow, maybe
Yeah.
not.
I would say I didn't do as much video when I was in college, and that's something that I regret doing. We did team video all the time, and I would just pray that my jersey number wasn't up there on the screen. But that's something that I definitely should have done more of, especially now and having more access to it now. Like the kids I coach are so lucky to have this access to Instat and be able to be on there nonstop and watching it. And we'll make them do mini groups where we put them in groups of 4, and we're like, okay, watch the game, and you 4 have to talk about it, talk about each other in the shifts. What do you see that's good? What do you see that's bad? And they will, and it's uncomfortable for them, but I think it's a really good learning tool for them.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Boy, it made me think of another good learning tool would be, I mean, all the experience you bring to this, and all the other coaches, obviously. But how have you, like, what was one of the most difficult times in your higher level career, so like college and beyond, and how were you able to take that experience and how you got through that and kind of relate that to your team?
That's a tough one. I would say probably two parts of this. I would say fighting through injuries and coming back to the lineup would be one. And then the other one I'd say is my freshman year, being on the freshman line, the fourth line, and how to stay motivated every day to continue to work hard in practice. So I was fortunate that my freshman year I played. Our team was strong enough that we did play a freshman, but my line was all freshmen. But there were games that we dressed and maybe we didn't play as much, and which was fine. But I think for me, I guess those are the two biggest kind of things I guess were difficult. Um, and it goes back to kind of the mindset and mindset training, and how do you stay positive? How do you not tell yourself in your head like, oh God, I sucked today. Oh, I sucked here. Like how to flip the mindset, be like, nope, I'm fine. Reset. This is opportunity, or whatever it is. Or like when my next shift's my best shift. If I get 4, I get 4 shifts. I get 2, I get 2 shifts. They're my best shifts. And I think that's kind of the best thing I use with coaching now is, maybe we do have players that don't play as much, or we have players that maybe not on a power play or a penalty kill. And if I see their heads down, I'll just constantly remind them, like, hey, I got you. I got you. You're good. You're gonna go. You're going. We do a lot of stuff like that with our kids, and especially mindset training and things like that. And then I guess the other part would be the injuries is hard. I had a few injuries in college that I was out for a little bit, just because shoulder, knee injury as well. And then coming back from that, you never know, especially at the college level, you never know when you come back from injury. Hey, is my spot taken? I don't know. Is someone better than I am right now? How am I going to get back in the lineup? And I guess just goes back to that kind of like what I said earlier. It's every day, and it's the hardest part is it's every day. You just got to get through it, and you got to show up, and you got to do the work.
Yeah, how do you, and it's interesting that both that injury comment and the freshman line comment kind of came back to the accepting your role, whether
Yeah.
it's for a day or a week. I mean, and you talked about talking it every day and things like that. What's the importance to you, and how do you tell your team to kind of embrace the role they're in at the moment to help the collective?
Yeah, we use the saying of it's us, we together family. And we always use that with them. And we always say it's to do it for the person to the left of you, the person to the right of you, and the person across from you. And I think that relates a lot with them. Like I'll hear them say it all the time when we're not around. They're like, oh, sweet, together, family. And I think, that's a culture that we're trying to build. And I think that's kind of what helps. For example, if if a teammate or player sees a player maybe not getting as many shifts, like I've witnessed them on the bench and they're just giving them a pat on the knee. They're like, hey, you're good, I got you, and you're gonna go, I believe in you. And then when they're out there, a whole bench is cheering or whatever it is. I think that's kind of the same thing that was in college too. And I remember my freshman year, we had a senior that kind of said that, and she goes, everyone's role is going to be different. You just got to know your role and you got to accept your role and whatever that role is. And then I think that's kind of like the one thing that really stuck with me is, hey, I might be that fourth line winger, and that's what it is. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to grind away because that's what coach wants for us, and that's what's the best for the team. Or hey, I am going to be the goal scorer today, and that's my role.
Yeah, that's so huge, and just the teammates' support and valuing the role that everyone plays to keep that energy positive, and not positive in like that Pollyanna
Yeah.
way, but just
Yep.
that you're good, you got this, we believe
Yep.
in you. That's, I mean, that's the difference between championship teams and non-championship teams,
Yeah.
in my opinion. How hard was it, back to the injury stuff? How hard was it to step back onto the ice after an injury and like not worry about the next hit might do that again?
Hard. That's for sure.
How did
Um,
you fight through that?
yeah. So especially with my shoulder, that was a big one. I just remember obviously the first couple of practices back, you're in non-contact, which is fine. And then I got thrown into a contact jersey a day before a game, and I just remember my coach saying, "Hey, if you don't go contact, you're not playing tomorrow." And to me, I was like, "All right, screw that." I'm like, "Come out here and hit me because I'm playing contacts. I'm playing tomorrow." But I would say, I remember coming back from that, and I remember it's gonna sound crazy to say, but I had a teammate, and before we got on the ice, I was like, "Hey, just like push me in the boards. Like I want to see what it feels like. Just push me in the boards." And it's crazy to say it, but sometimes that's what you need to do because she did that. I was like, "Oh, that doesn't hurt." I was like, "Okay, I'm fine." And I guess the other thing too, especially at the college level, is to trust the process. I was grateful that we had really good trainers. Um, I wouldn't have been out there for that unless they told me I was ready to go. But just trusting the process is trusting your body. And I got the other part too is like recovery and how am I taking care of my body? How am I helping myself heal faster? How am I helping myself recover after games and stuff like that too with it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, two great point. I didn't think it was crazy that you had somebody push you into the boards because you know the other teams are watching it and going to
Yeah.
do it. But the recovery point, I mean, I think we can get into the, especially as high performance athletes, and maybe some coaches pushing it that, we've got to work, we've got to work, we've got to work, we've got to work. And I think it's equally important to recover just as hard as you work
Yep.
if you're going to play
Yep.
at a high level.
Yep. Yeah. We always like that's something that when I was in college, I took very seriously. I had a really good friend who was a sophomore when I was there, and I remember the first week, she was like, "Oh, go take an ice bath." And I was like, "Ice bath?" I was like, "You're crazy. I'm not getting in that cold tub." And she's like, "No, your legs are going to feel so much better." And so I went in with her, and she was right. I felt so much better. So like, I was so consistent with doing ice baths. I was so consistent with stretching and rolling out. It's definitely something that I think I should have taken much more serious at a younger age, especially in terms of stretching as a hockey player. But that's something we do now, like with our program here. It's Mondays we're off from practice, but we do mobility Mondays. So our kids are doing mobility. Today when I left work, there was kids doing ice baths out in the parking lot. So it's like how much you sleep, how much you eat, how much you drink, how much you stretch is just as important as how much you're gonna put on the bar today and you're gonna squat or how much extra shooting you're doing. And I think that's something that like now as a coach, like we are so much more on them than I was as a player when I was growing up that I just didn't take it as serious or maybe I didn't think it was as serious. And it leads to not getting as many injuries too. If you're recovered, you're stretched, I'm not saying you can't get an injury. You can definitely get an injury, but it does kind of help eliminate some of those possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's kind of like the mindset stuff to me. It's like doing it doesn't necessarily guarantee this, but not doing it's guaranteeing it won't be there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of that. Um, so what's the future hold for you? Where do you see yourself in like 5 to 10 years?
It's crazy to say that, but I don't know. I really love what I'm doing here at BK. I've thought about the college coaching world. I have had opportunities where I've been like kind of asked to interview at positions like that. I have friends that are doing in college coaching world and they love it too. But I really, really enjoy this age group that I'm with. I love the 16U level. I love it's more so like they're so excited to learn. They're so excited to get better. They show up, they crack a joke with you. They're funny. They complain about how miserable school is, but at the end of the day, like they're there and they're like coach, how can I get better? I need to get faster. I need to get stronger. I'm like, hey, I got you. Let's talk about it. Let's make a routine. Um, so I'd say 5 years. I hope I'm still at BK. I would love to still be at BK in terms of that. If there's an opportunity that comes up in terms of college coaching, maybe it is the right fit for me. Maybe I do take that. But I would definitely say within 5 years, I still definitely will be in hockey.
Yeah,
Considering
well,
that,
you've got your foot in the national team door
yeah,
now. Maybe you'll
yeah,
be up
that's
there.
definitely a goal too eventually. We'll see if that happens. But
Maybe you'll make
yeah,
a comeback and be on the ice.
never. After I had the
Um,
surgery, there's no more.
I like it's such a great environment when the athletes are all showing up and want to put in that effort to get better. And um, you're not feeling the pressure of driving that energy of the team. It's
Yeah.
great when it's being driven from
Yep.
underneath.
Yeah, and I've experienced that too in the past with coaching. Maybe sometimes, and everybody has a different reason, and every team has a different reason for what they want to coach. And, teams I was coaching in the past, maybe it was more so for fun, and kind of me as a coach, I was much more competitive and more into it. So I think with me being at BK, like I relate to those kids so much every day. Either they're up at 6 a.m. shooting, they're doing a fan bike, whatever it is, and I'm like, man, that was me in college. I was doing stairs at 6:30 because I wanted to get in better shape or whatever it was, and it's just they're competitive. They want to win. I want to win just as badly. When we lose, I'm probably more upset than they are at times, which is bad as a coach. But like, it just goes to show that I think I kind of found where I really want to be, and I enjoy it really a lot. And it's home too, so I enjoy being home as well after being gone for a while.
Yeah, yeah, true. Kind of back to the education thing. I thought of it. One of my favorite sayings is our athletes can't follow a stop sign, which would be us. Do you feel there's days or weeks where you're like, oh man, these guys are getting so good. I've got to like up my education game to stay ahead of them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely felt like that before I came into BK. Just because having not coached at this high level before, and like I said earlier, there's kids that are on the national team, there's kids that play D1. I never played D1, so I guess that was definitely some self-doubt originally going into it. I'm very fortunate that my coaching partner, he's was phenomenal since day one, and I even brought that up to him. I was like, man, I'm like, I don't know if I'm on this level. He's like, you wouldn't be here if we didn't think you're on this level. He's like, you know what you're doing, you're a phenomenal coach, things like that. So it's like I have the support from my coaching staff, but I mean, to your point, every day, yeah, there's definitely days where they pull out moves. I'm like, oh, I could never demonstrate that move. I'm like, don't have to do that. Like, or they're just things like that. Um, but that's kind of why, like, I am very adamant. I constantly am watching the NHL games. I watch college hockey games. I'll watch replays of highlights or whatever it is to kind of continue to grow, I guess, my skill set, stuff like that.
That's funny. That's like when you'd come out and help me with the girls I was coaching. I'd be like, hey Mel, you want to show that skating drill?
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm like, I can't do that. My knees don't bend anymore.
Oh man. Last question. I appreciate your time tonight. If you were looking back at young Mel at 6 years, 7 years old, what advice would you give her today?
Hmm. What advice did I would give? I would say stay true to myself and always trust the process because there's always something planned for you that is what I'm going to put in for myself. So I
Nice. I
guess,
like it.
yeah, I guess that would be it. I mean, I would say I kind of was competitive from the beginning, but I would just say continue to trust the process because I'm here for a reason where I am now. And it wasn't a straight line to here and it wasn't easy, but kind of like I was just saying before, like I found where I want to be and where I belong. And I think I guess I'd just say trust the process. It's gonna
Man,
take you where
I just love that. It's not a straight line and it wasn't easy. You wanted to play in college. There was maybe some doubters and you took the ups and the
yeah,
downs and you just kept with it and now look at you.
yeah,
So the real question is, would the younger version of you have listened to your advice you just gave?
no way. Too stubborn.
Mel, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much. It's been a
Yeah,
great talk.
I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah, always. Good luck on the ice. I'm going to try to get out and see something at some point. So
Yeah, I'll send you our
you'll have to
schedule.
send me a schedule.
Yeah, I will for sure.
All right. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.